All right, everybody, let's get the show started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Lunchtime Discovery Series. My name is Chris Smith. I am your host here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences for the Lunchtime Discovery Series, which is a lecture program brought to you and coordinated by the folks in the Office of Environmental Education within the Department of Environmental Quality. We work together to host and put on a fantastic program for you. We meet right here around the glow of our YouTube screens and sometimes inside the museum in the SECU Daily Planet Theater, where we have the opportunity to meet interesting people who are doing good, interesting, exciting, and important work out there across North Carolina in the worlds of science, nature, conservation, education, sometimes art, and even more. And for the month of May, we have been hearing stories about resiliency, about building a better future, one that is better able to cope and deal with and mitigate the effects of things like climate change, for example. And of course, in the last several months, we've been talking a lot about natural disasters in North Carolina. Now, last week, if you tuned into the show or were in the theater, we were talking about resiliency on the coast, things like coastal flooding and coastal erosion, and the projects that are going on out there. This week, we are going to the complete opposite side of the state. We're headed into the mountains, into Western North Carolina, where, once again, of course, we're here to talk a little bit about Hurricane Helene and the aftermath. Of course, this is one of the most dramatic and tragic things to have happened across the state of North Carolina in very recent memory, of course. And so we've been bringing people in who are doing the great, good, and important work of protecting the environment, building more resilient communities, building resilient ecosystems, and of, well, just like neighbors taking care of one another. And so I'm really excited for today's program as well, where we can continue to dive in on those themes. Everybody, I want you to meet Jon Stamper. Jon is the River Cleanup Coordinator for Mountain True and the Western North Carolina Riverkeepers. And Jon joins me now. How's it going, Jon?
Hey, doing great today. Thanks so much for having me on.
Glad that you could be here. I'm excited to hear more about the work that you've got going on uh, and what it's like to work in the aftermath of Helene and doing this really interesting and important work for people and the environment.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Got a lot to tell everyone about our progress and where we're headed.
Well, let's get into it. I'll turn it over to you.
That sounds great. Go ahead and share my screen. All right. I'd like to get started just by, thanking everyone for the opportunity to be here today, particularly the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, as well and the Environmental Education and Public Affairs side of things. And then also the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. So really grateful for the opportunity to be here and tell everyone about what we're experiencing post Helene in Western North Carolina. Again, my job is the River Cleanup Coordinator with Mountain True and the Western North Carolina Riverkeepers. Mountain True is a nonprofit that champions clean waters, healthy communities, and resilient forests. So I do operate on the Clean Waters Department. We, as Mountain True, have been around for over 40 years with a long history of service to our communities. We operate the Riverkeeper programs on the French Broad River, the Broad River, the Green River, the Watauga River, as well as our western region, which encompasses a significant portion of the western end of the state, as well as a little bit of northern Georgia. So we've been at this for a long time, even before Hurricane Helene hit. So we have experience in river cleanups, water quality testing and sampling, as well as the resilient forest and healthy community sides of our program. So from the beginning of when the flood hit, I think everyone knew that this was different. Most folks are used to some level of flooding in the mountains, obviously just nothing like this. So I will give you a little background about how I, got into this role. My role was created in December as a need to respond to the devastation from Hurricane Helene. Before I took this position, I had previously been a director of operations at a fairly good sized outdoor recreation company that offered whitewater rafting, tubing, kayaking, guided tours, that sort of thing. I have been in that industry and worked along the French Broad River for well over a decade, and have experienced a lot of flooding over the years. But again, nothing to the scale that we experienced with Helene. So I came from a military background. I am a native of Asheville. I currently live in Marshall, North Carolina. But once I got out of the military, I was very fortunate to land in the river community with boaters, whitewater, canoeing, that sort of thing. It really kind of altered the course of my life, and it's been something that has been, kind of intertwined into who I am as a person for a really long time. So when the flood hit, unfortunately, all of the locations of the business that I ran made their way down the French Broad River. So lesson learned is it's complicated if you put all of your business locations in one floodplain. So moving forward from that, I was ready to jump into some type of a role where I could start working on cleaning all of this up in whatever way I could. Had the opportunity to come on to the Mountain True team and work with a great group of folks that have been at this for a long time. I wanted to go nonprofit for a while. I didn't really expect it to happen like this, but here we are. And I kind of found myself at the right time, at the right place with some of the experience needed to execute the cleanups that we're going to be dealing with moving forward, so that we can, start to recover in Western North Carolina. So, immediately after the flood, I wasn't part of Mountain True, but I do want to highlight some of the work that they hit the ground running with, literally while the floodwaters were still up. And then I'll kind of move into where we've gone from there. So, leading up to the flood, I think a lot of our staff members are, we've been through a lot of flooding here in Asheville. The area that I worked, we once or twice a year knew that we were going to have to shut down operations and expect some level of flooding. Again, nobody expected it at this level. Once everyone started to see that we were dealing with a significant disaster, everyone jumped into action mode. So pretty much immediately following the flood, Mountain True basically hit the ground running. They got out there, they fed people. We operated in several places all over Western North Carolina, just simply getting food to people that needed it. As you all can imagine, it was trying times. There was limited, cell phone service. Communication was extremely complicated. People were cut off. So some of our staff members were delivering supplies and oxygen tanks. Everybody really got out on the front line and did what they could to help their community in the most immediate way that they could. We also used our water quality testing and sampling skills to help folks test their well water. As you might imagine, in some low-lying areas, folks' wells were compromised by floodwaters. It pretty quickly became apparent that we needed to test that so that folks could, return to clean drinking water. So, I believe one of our Riverkeepers, Andy up on the Watauga, I think he put almost 1,000 miles on his ATV just delivering supplies into areas that were cut off. And then, some of our other team members, after they fed folks, immediately got out and started assessing the damage and the destruction that we saw from Helene. So, the area has had flooding in the past, but not on this scale, and certainly not in recent memory. Some of our Riverkeepers were out almost immediately surveying the damage and even floating through some of the calmer floodwaters, looking to help folks and figure out what our path forward was. So that was kind of the immediate response. I think Mountain True pretty quickly identified that this is a long battle. And then that's my position of river cleanup coordinator was created. So I jumped in, and at that point, we started looking at how we were going to approach this. You'll probably hear me say this several times today, but there's no playbook for this. A lot of this has been stuff that we have learned as we move through the process. We're relying on extensive experience in river cleanups, but not many folks have experience in cleanups in this at this scale. As I came onto the team, we really started looking at it. How do we approach this? This was in December. It was still very cold. We realized that, at first we needed to operate from a land based standpoint. So, our goal really started with just opening up the access points along our rivers, so that as we got into warmer temperatures, they were open for us to continue our cleanup efforts. We also identified that, the outdoor recreation industry in Western North Carolina is an economic driver. We're talking about billions of dollars of money spent in the region and thousands of jobs. With the background I have, working in the guiding world and employing folks who take people out into our beautiful rivers and wild spaces, it was really important to me that we take care of those folks, as there's some level of uncertainty on what the path forward was for them. So we really started our approach by working in a land-based manner. We were able to, start a plan to get to the access points, clean them up so that we could then in turn access other stretches of the rivers. And then, in some of our watersheds, we found that the debris and the damage is very different from one another. Some places you're talking about huge amounts of PVC pipe, like you see in front of me, or in our imagery. Other places are houses and cars. Other places are, plastic trash and debris. So it's very dependent on the river, and that's something we identified pretty quickly, that we would have to stay pretty flexible with. So this image that I have up, and I'm going to go back one. This is PVC pipe from the French Broad River. We've got approximately a third of the river that's been heavily affected by PVC pipe that is washed down into the river from the Silverline plant. We're talking about thousands of miles of PVC pipe that we are working to remove. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that later, but that's just one of the challenges that we're facing. The image now is actually a good example of one of our work sites. So the thing you see in the bottom left corner is actually a crumpled up dumpster. So that gives you a sense of the power and the scale of the devastation that we're talking about. You'll also notice huge amounts of woody debris, as well as PVC pipe tucked up into the trees. A lot of these sites are, unstable and dangerous and have to be approached with caution. The first thing that we really focused on was figuring out a plan on how we approach this safely for our volunteers and for our paid workforce. So as you can see, there's some things that are just simply not something that you're going to be able to pick out by hand. So that's been a collaboration with a lot of other entities, to include, contractors, the Corps of Engineers, and then other state and federal and local entities, as we work through these problems. Most of these sites don't have a clear answer to how you approach. I think they all are very site specific. So that was kind of part of the initial learning phase of like, how do we get going with this? How do we gain steam and get out there and start making an impact? So that kind of leads me into one of the programs that we helped, and kind of learned from. Blue Heron Whitewater Rafting is a great whitewater rafting outfitter in Marshall. Fritz is one of the owners there, and Fritz very immediately just saw a need to get folks out into the rivers and start cleaning up. Some of the rivers that we're talking about are shallow and wadable, and they're not full of obstructions. Most folks would be comfortable going out there and walking around in them. Other stretches of Western North Carolina rivers are class 3 and class 4 whitewater. They present significant, safety concerns for folks. So we identified early on that we were going to need to rely on folks that have the experience operating in these environments. And in a lot of situations, that is your whitewater rafting guides, that is your fly fishing and fishing guides. These are folks that are versed in these environments and know how to operate safely. So what Fritz at Blue Heron did was acquire some private funding and started standing up a team. Mountain True operated as a vessel to help get that funding and those workers paid. But Blue Heron really kind of led the charge in trying to figure out ways to start collecting, bundling, and moving trash. So we kind of worked with Blue Heron and Fritz to come up with a plan and learn from the experience that they had, and then kind of begin to formulate our own plan and team. So that was really one of the starting points for how we've gotten to where we're at now. Very early on in the process, our Riverkeepers started volunteer operations. We have been operating volunteer cleanups all over Western North Carolina for a long time. The public was ready to go. As soon as the water came down, folks were ready to get their hands dirty. They were ready to help their neighbors. And then also they were ready to start cleaning up the waterways all over Western North Carolina. So very quickly, we got boots on the ground and started cleanup operations, even just operating from the banks. There are some examples of places in Western North Carolina where we've got, as you can see in this image, PVC pipe all over the place. That's one example. But another side of this is just we got our volunteers. They showed up in force. We got out there with them and helped facilitate cleanup operations while ensuring that we were doing everything we could to keep everyone safe. That's our number one priority as we work through these debris piles with both our cleanup paid crews as well as our volunteer operations. One of the things we pretty quickly identified was, especially right after the flood, these volunteer operations were great for the community. This gave folks an opportunity to come together, to take back a little bit of control over what has been a pretty tough situation for many people in this region. We found very quickly that people bonded. They started telling stories about what they'd experienced during the actual event. They started talking about, what they wanted to see for recovery. And very quickly, it just, kind of hit me that this is cathartic for a lot of folks who have experienced a lot of loss and damage to their homes. It's very humbling to be out on a cleanup site, and realize that some of the folks that are helping you are people who lost everything in the flood. So that was something that I, personally wasn't prepared for. And then as soon as I, realized that I've got folks out here on these volunteer operations that are, they've lost everything and they're still out there, picking up trash, it really drove the point home on how we need to approach this. We need to be cautious about how we do this and respectful of the people who have lost so much. So as we saw the success of the volunteer operations, we really expanded those operations all over Western North Carolina. And as a result of that, we also realized that we were going to need to expand our paid workforce. Like I mentioned before, many places in Western North Carolina along these rivers, there's great places where we can take folks out with limited skill sets and experience that can just simply get along the banks and clean up, or maybe wade in ankle deep water. But there are a lot of stretches that involve technical whitewater skills. So that's when we really realized that we need to expand our paid workforce. So that kind of led us to branch off in two different directions, continuing the incredible work that our volunteers were doing, helping organize them, schedule events, identify locations that were not only safe, but had access through whether it be private property access agreements, public lands, municipal lands. So we took the lead on planning, scheduling, and executing volunteer cleanups. Again, it's so critical that we operate out there in a safe manner. These sites are very dynamic. They change based on water levels. They change with weather. They're still, in some places actively shifting and moving. So we established the equipment and processes that we would need to put in place to keep everyone safe while also being effective. And as we worked through that, we started building our paid workforce. Um, so the paid workforce to this point, we had relied on the crew that the Blue Heron Whitewater Rafting Company and Fritz had been operating, and they had been very focused on particularly one of the heavily trafficked stretches of the French Broad River, which is referred to as Section 9 of the French Broad River. Again, it's one of the most trafficked stretches of the French Broad. Their crew had been focused on that and learned a lot of lessons. So we kind of took some of their lessons learned and started applying that to other places around Western North Carolina. We started seeking additional funding to pay these crews, to pay for trash bags and safety vests and gloves and trash pickers and then disposal fees, and started working on how we would continue to fund this program and these expanding workforces. So we started hiring our paid workforce. I was very, very fortunate to hire a lot of folks that had actually previously been employed with me at the company that I had run, as well as a lot of others from throughout the region who represent folks that were essentially had lost their jobs as a result of Helene. So again, this includes whitewater rafting guides, fishing guides, folks that ran hair salons, just a broad spectrum of folks. We brought them together as a team. We trained off of some of the experiences we had learned. I am a swiftwater rescue instructor through the American Canoe Association. I have pretty extensive experience on the water, so we applied a lot of things that our folks had learned along the way to make sure that we're out there in a safe manner. And so we started building that team. And now, at this point, honestly, that team is picking up so much trash I can barely keep up with them, which is a great problem to have. We continue to look for additional funding, and trained in and got to work. So now I'm happy to report, combined both our volunteer operations as well as our paid workforce, Mountain True and the area Riverkeepers here have removed approximately 2.8 million pounds of debris. Around 400,000 pounds of that has been hand-picked debris. Something that I think is worth highlighting about this debris is, folks refer to it as trash a lot, but I would push back a little bit and say nobody intended for any of this to end up in our rivers. We are picking up stuff from people's homes, from their lives. Nobody intentionally put this all here. So this debris, there's a lot of challenges that come along with it. Mountain True has worked with contractors. Mountain True again is mainly focused on hand pickable debris, and debris that can be moved by human power. It's very important to us that we protect these rivers and riparian areas and riverbanks, and don't cause excessive damage as we go through the process of removing all of this debris. We want to get it out of there before it washes into the rivers and makes its way further and deeper into the ecosystem. So the building of the paid workforce was a big part of that supplemented the volunteer operations. In the image that you see now, this is Jack Henderson. He manages our paddle trail. He's giving a safety brief to our volunteer operation before we get started at a cleanup that we conducted back in the early part of this year. So that's the part of the learning process here again, is how do we keep people safe and give them the equipment they need to be effective when they get out into these areas. So typically our crew will conduct a safety orientation. Our crews will get to the site ahead of time. identify any hazards, and make sure that we have, a safe plan in case we have any injuries. And then, yeah, just work through the site and kind of figure out how we're going to approach it. Each site, again, is very different. Some sites you show up and you kind of feel like, how do I even start? But then hardworking folks get to work and you start to chip away at it. And by the time you leave at the end of the day, you've made noticeable impacts. I'm extremely proud of not only, the volunteers, but also the paid workforce. Most sites we are leaving them cleaner than they were before the storm. So we are going through them with a fine tooth comb. We're picking up the large debris. We're also picking up all the little stuff that might have been overlooked. Um, so, again, the safety of those volunteers, in my opinion, is kind of one of the most important things. And, as we're working through these sites, this is in the early winter. Again, we also identified that getting the access points back open is going to be critical. So this image is an image of the Redmond Dam access. This access area had been completely destroyed. You couldn't drive into it, but this is a popular boating access for not only private, folks who go out and paddle on their own, but also outdoor, outfitters who, rely on these access points to run their business. So we have partnered with local municipalities, federal, really anybody that we need to ensure that these access points are back open. One, so that we can, make sure that folks can get out on the water when it's time to do so, but also so that we, as a cleanup crew, can access these points and use them as points of consolidation for the debris that we're picking up. With our volunteer operations and our paid workforce, we get onto a site and we collect all this debris. And then the next part of that equation is, how do we get it off the river? How do we move it off site and get it taken care of appropriately? So, like I mentioned before, there's no real playbook for this. We have past experience. We looked into the experience that other folks might have had in other locations around the country and around the world, dealing with the high velocity flooding that we've experienced here. So we kind of hit our developed our plan, and then just really hit the gas on, again, the paid workforce and the volunteer operations. A lot of what we've done here has been lessons learned that we are applying to our process. So we get out there, we get onto a site, we work for a day or two, and we realize, hey, this isn't working, or hey, this is working great. So we take that knowledge and then we apply it, and then share that knowledge with not just within our organization, but other organizations that are doing this, because there's beyond us, there are lots of great organizations from the get-go, who again have gotten out, got boots on the ground, gotten muddy. So we're trying to share that knowledge and also learn from what they're learning, to be more efficient and more effective. A lot of the lessons that we have learned have been, on how we get to some of this trash. So a prime example of that is along the French Broad River, below Woodfin, North Carolina. The Silverline and Ipex Plastic Facility, as I mentioned before, deposited huge amounts of PVC plastic. A lot of the situations, and I'm going to go back a couple of slides here. This is what we're referring to as PVC Island. This site is approximately, 75 feet wide by 150 feet long. It's a little bit tricky to get a sense of scale here, but what you're looking at is PVC plastic agricultural line that was coiled up at a factory. When the flood hit, all of this washed downriver. In some instances, the coils stay together. You can throw them in a boat and just take them out. In most instances, this PVC pipe became uncoiled and then became entangled in all of the log jams and riverbanks. This creates a huge safety and hazard, as well as an ecological disaster that we're going to be cleaning up for a really long time. So this was part of the learning curve. Is this is a site that we pulled up onto, and it's like, where do you even start? And what we've identified and come up with is, we are cutting it into 6-foot sections. we were bundling it up, and we were moving it off the river via several different means. That can mean human powered, rafts. That can mean powered vessels. A lot of instances, our crews are coming up with creative solutions to be able to address these needs. A lot of times at the end of the day, in the image you can see here, we load everything up into a dump trailer and haul it off to the appropriate site. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, but that's kind of the second half of the cleanup battle. We get folks out there. We identify the most effective way to clean up. We get the trash and debris collected, and then we move it off site to where the most suitable location is. So another big part of this is, what tools do you use? That's been a whole conversation and learning curve that we've had. A lot of this debris and this stuff in the river is doesn't neatly pack up and fit into a trash bag. We're talking about sharp metal and tin roofing from houses, and different types of tires and plastic. So anything that you can imagine that exists in a town, a city, a house, a home, it is all along the banks and in the river. So as you might imagine, there's some unique challenges on it. Well, how do you even get this out of here? So that's been a big part of it. We've identified that pruning loppers that you might use to cut your small branches off of a tree are extremely effective at cutting PVC pipe to bundle up. That's not something we knew until we started. Um, we again really want to take a light-handed approach to this to protect, these areas that we don't want to come in and destroy habitats and riverbanks. So, where we go in, we try to take up as small of a footprint and be as conscious of these areas as we can. We quickly identified that, particularly in the whitewater stretches of the river, again, we're going to need these folks with these talents and skills and swift water rescue training. Frequently you will see us out on sites where we have set up a rope across the river, and we're using small vessels to put the trash into and move it from one side of the river to the other. That poses some challenges, as we want to continue to make sure that our waterways are navigable, and that we're making sure that folks and outfitters that are out there recreating are able to do so safely. We don't want to disrupt that while we're doing what we need to do. So we've learned a lot on that, on how to yield to the public, on how to make sure that we take up small places at some of our river access points that can be very busy, particularly as we work our way into more of the boating season. Other tools that we have found that are really helpful have been, electric cordless sawzall or reciprocating saws. This gives us the opportunity to cut some of this debris out. Again, I would mention that a lot of it is very intertwined into the banks and into the shorelines. There are places where we're talking about cars and decks and portions of houses. Some of that is a little bit bigger than we can handle at once. We typically have to cut stuff up and remove it in small sections. We identified early on that this is going to continue to be a learning process. There's, again, no playbook and no one right answer. And we've learned that being flexible and being able to work with each environment and location is pretty critical. So that's been kind of the proof of concept on how we're going to operate and scale up our workforce. That is kind of where we're headed moving forward. And there's been some other interesting things that have come as a result, particularly of this paid workforce and volunteer operations. Very commonly at cleanup operations, we have either volunteers or workforce members who find stuff that are the effects and personal effects of people who lost their homes. And that is something that, when we start on a site, we always encourage folks to be cautious of what we might post on social media. If we wouldn't want anybody to see something that was like a family heirloom or an identifiable part of their family's life, and see it pop up on Facebook in a way that isn't respectful. And over the course of this, we started finding things that we realized, hey, I think we can actually return this to these folks. So it's very fortunate to have one of our team members, Mandy, who is a has an archaeological background, and she has essentially taken on, returning personal items and effects to people that we find. So I feel very lucky to highlight a couple of success stories with that. I think that really highlight the human aspect of this because this, the folks that are out here volunteering and our paid workforce, this can be it's hard work first off, but it also can be emotionally taxing as you are working through again what has been people's homes. So on the Swananoa River in the Biltmore Village area of Asheville, we were working on a site, and some volunteers came up to us and found a photo album. This was a photo album of some kids. You could tell that it was, a family photo album. It was muddy, but it was very much in all things considered in pretty good shape. It actually had kind of been encased in like a mud cocoon. So we wiped the mud off of it and realized like we need to do something here to try to get this back to these folks. So Mandy took that on, and there's been great Facebook groups all over Western North Carolina that have posted saying, "Hey, we lost everything. If you find anything, let us know." So Mandy posted this, and we were able to return this photo album to a family who had lost it. And the child pictured is now 12 years old. As you might imagine, it was a pretty emotional experience to return that to these folks who have lost so much. And so that was a major light bulb. It's like, all right, well, as we continue to work through these scenes all over Western North Carolina, we are going to continue to make it a priority to return anything that we can to these folks who've lost so much. So that was kind of the first success story. And then part of that success story, right next to that photo album, we found a mug, like a coffee mug, with a gentleman standing next to Reba McEntire wearing a Reba McEntire t-shirt. And we realized pretty quickly that this was somebody's like photo opportunity. They'd maybe been to a concert or something like that. So again, we started, Mandy was on the trail and was able to track these folks down. It turned out it was part of the family who had lost the photo album. So we were able to return this mug to these folks. And it had actually been kind of an important part of this family's story, if you will. The father had gone to this concert, and there's like a lot of talk about it within the family, and it had actually sat on his desk as a holder for his pens for many years. So it was like actually a little bit of a family heirloom. So again, that just reinforced that as we work through this process, we really, really need to focus on the human aspect, and get what we can back to folks. So that's something we're going to continue to do. We have had and I have a very one bag at a time approach to this whole process. We're going to be in this for the long haul until we get the last bag of trash off the river. But now that's something that is really invigorating to our team, and our volunteers to find stuff and make that connection back to folks. So that's one part of the cleanup process. We show up to a site, we work that site until we're completed. A good example of that would be the Stackhouse boating access point along French Broad River. Over the course of 2 weeks, our 12-person cleanup team removed approximately 35,000 pounds of trash, debris, and items from people's homes. So we started to gather the data to figure out how effective this was, and how we were going to move forward and scale this operation up. The first group of 10 to 12 that we started with is operative. As of now, that one group of 12 has been operating for approximately just shy of 2 months. They have hit 70,000 pounds of trash. That again, I can't keep up with the amount of debris that they're removing, which is a great problem to have. So that kind of brings us into the last step of the process of cleaning up at a site. And that is, what do we do with it? Each site is different. Each county and municipality is different. So we operate within the confines of those areas. Mountain True, again, is a nonprofit. So, we incur a fair amount of cost disposing of this. So there's many different methods. We, haul it off in our own dump trailer that's been donated to us through private donations. We work with dumpster services. We work with local municipalities. What's key to us is that it's disposed of in the most responsible manner that we can. There's definitely not a clear cut answer on this, and it varies very much by the area that we operate in. Um, we continue to want to work to hold polluters accountable. Some examples of that have been the PVC pipe. We're looking to them to support some of these efforts. At some sites, particularly on the area that was affected by the PVC pipe, that accounts for approximately 35 to 45% of the debris that we're removing. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of pounds of debris. So we continue to want to work to hold folks accountable that contributed to this. Again, so much of this was just the public who lost homes or who lost businesses. But yeah, we want to make sure that we seek and try to follow up with support that we might receive from anyone that played a big part in having some of the debris wash into the river. So, we've worked around and with the Army Corps of Engineers. They were grateful for the heavy lifting that they have done. That is not something that we have been particularly focused on. We are, again, more focused on hand-picked, smaller debris, typically something that can be moved by human beings. There was the devastation and the scale most folks have likely seen, but it's hard to describe the scale of some of these sites and some of the debris that we're talking about. The image in front of me there now is just a representation of one workday. And as you can see, that's quite a bit of work and a lot of trash hauled. But that's not accounting for all the large debris that came out maybe before we got there. So with that being said, we're grateful for the work that the Corps of Engineers has done, but also with any entity that's working in our rivers and along our banks. We want to make sure that they're preserving habitats and being, as responsible with these areas and delicate areas as possible. The next image here I have is a little bit blurry, but that's one of our crews hand paddling a big, raft full of debris out and across the river. So that's a good example of some of the stuff we're doing. This is one of our crew members operating at a site where, you can see the PVC pipe coiled up. We're bagging up what trash we can. This is another image of one of our crew members who is, taking that PVC pipe off site. But again, this is one stretch of one river. This is only a representation of the French Broad. This isn't, this PVC pipe doesn't affect every area, but the area it does affect it, there's a high concentration of it. Other rivers represent other challenges. Again, you can see in this image, there's some coiled up PVC pipe, but right below that, you're taking a look at essentially like, what would have been someone's home. So that's like building supplies. We encounter a huge amount of, woody debris. But, again, as we work through this, we're trying to get out what we can that's man-made. We typically don't remove a whole lot of organic matter. There are instances where it's going to need to be removed, but in a lot of cases, some of it can stay and create habitats. And what we just don't want to see is excessive woody debris removal all over our watersheds, and that's something that we continue to have conversation about. The next image here, I'm really proud of this. This is a dump trailer that was donated, as well as an SUV that was donated through private donations to Mountain True. We have put that thing to use. In this instance, we are using it to ferry trash from one location across a private property to another location where it is then consolidated and moved off site. So this is just a good example that represents a few hours worth of work. So we're making a big impact wherever we go. We definitely have a long way to go, and are more than ready to expand and move forward with our paid workforce operations. We intend to put work crews in all of the affected areas and have established the processes that we need to have in place to effectively operate those teams, keep them supplied, and then again continue to focus on that human aspect, which is getting stuff back to people when we can, and also again just being conscious of the environment that we're working in. So I'll give you a shot of me hard at work there. That is, a good example. You can see that there's a little bit of plastic that's in the trees. Some of this debris that we're after is tiny. It's microplastics. It's stuff that we want to get out before it washes down into the river, deteriorates. Alongside of the big debris, there's tiny stuff that we're after as well. And then I kind of have an image here. This is our French Broad River team, who was they recently conducted a trip all the way down the French Broad from its start in the headwaters, all the way down to where it meets Lake Douglas, approximately 144 miles of river covered, to assess and plan as we move through these cleanup operations. But I think it's a good representation of where we're headed. As we move forward, we're going to continue to source more funding and work for more funding to scale up our operations. We're ready to expand that workforce. We then also will be focusing on stream bank restoration. That is a whole next part of this equation, is how do we get these stream banks restored. There's going to be many avenues that we take to do that over the coming months, years. That's something that we continue to work through. We're working on some different programs that are going to help speed that process up. But I just really, really like this image because it kind of shows that, a lot of our rivers are back open for business. We kind of feel that, you take the normal precautions that you might while you paddle, maybe wear closed-toed shoes this season. But generally speaking, a lot of our waterways are ready for human recreation. I think if you're unsure, it's best to defer to a reputable outfitter if you're wanting to get out on the water. We are starting back up our water quality testing and swim reports. A lot of that is available on our website. I think as we move forward, we are going to continue to meet the needs of our communities, and we're going to be at this until the last bag of trash comes off the water. And we're going to continue to meet the moment and put people back to work, cleaning up our rivers and getting them back to where they were before the storm. So really grateful for the time to speak with everyone.
Jon, thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Incredible stuff. These stories are amazing. And you said earlier, 2.8 million pounds of debris removed.
That is correct, and rising every day.
And right, we said what, 70,000 pounds in 2 months? So a few
That
thousand
was so just
a
one
week.
work
That's
crew of 12
wow.
folks. Yeah, has hit approximately 70,000 pounds, and that was a number that I pulled 3 or 4 days ago. So it again would likely have increased since then.
That's amazing. This is incredible work. And I'm grateful that there are skilled, talented, and thoughtful people out there doing it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's been an honor to work with all these folks, these volunteers, the Mountain True team, and all the folks all over Western North Carolina and North Carolina at large that have helped donate to or fight for funding, or all the many things that have come together for us to be able to do this and continue to do this.
Amazing stuff. For everybody who's viewing the program right now, if you've got questions for Jon, you can drop those thoughts and questions into the chat on YouTube. I've got that pulled up right now, so as they pop up, we can continue to have a great conversation, and we've got several minutes left in the program to be able to do that. Jon, I'm curious about community response to the work that you're doing. I had the thought, like when I saw that French Broad Riverkeeper logo on the side of that dump trailer, I thought that thing going down the highway full of trash must make people feel good, or increase a sense of value and importance on organizations like Mountain True or the Riverkeepers.
Sure. Yeah, we hope so. We hope that folks see us out there, supporting them, because, again, some of the contractors and Corps of Engineers that have done the heavy lifting, soon their mission is going to be completed, and we're going to still be here. We're going to continue to operate. And kind of like I said, we're at it until the last bag of trash comes off the river. But I think it is really important for us as an organization and just the folks that are out there, for people to know that we're there to help them and clean up their rivers, their waterways. We'll continue to expand our operations and help out private property owners. That a lot of times that they are the ones that hold the access to the rivers that we need to get out onto. So yeah, it's critical that the folks know that we're there to support these communities.
A question from the chat that came in: is anyone coordinating all of the different groups cleaning up the different rivers?
Sure. So I can speak to what Mountain True and all of our river keepers are doing. So essentially, that is my job to coordinate everything that operates through Mountain True. What I can say is there's lots of other great organizations that are doing similar work. There's lots of kind of grassroots Facebook groups that are doing great work that just go out on a Saturday and clean up. I wouldn't say that there's one central, entity coordinating everything. But I am very happy to say that there's a lot of coordination between these groups. One of the things that we identified early on, and I've been very thankful to be able to do, is identify a group that maybe is doing great work, let's say out on the South Toe River. There's a great group of folks out there who are a kind of a mix of different entities that have come together, and they've been cleaning up since day one. So, in those instances, I try to go in and support them, if they need trash bags or if they need, dumpster service. But yeah, at least for the Mountain True and the Riverkeepers here in Western North Carolina, I'm kind of that coordinating force, but am also working with lots of other partner organizations. And we'll continue as we expand our scope. We will continue to try to work and coordinate with lots of other groups.
Great stuff. The next one here for you is: how are you weighing the trash collected?
Sure. So generally speaking, anytime it goes to a mitigation site, sometimes if it goes to a landfill, usually that's how it's paid for, is by weight. So typically that is something that is, once you say you take a trailer load full to an appropriate facility, you weigh in on your way in, and then as you leave, you weigh out. And then again, Mountain True is a nonprofit, is continuing to pay for that. So that's somewhere where, as we, continue to source funding from, private, state, federal entities, that's something that will certainly help. But yeah, in other instances, if we say hire a dumpster service, that data is given to us. So we take pretty good records on that, and we want to make sure that we're, accurately representing what we're pulling off the river. Some of the initial numbers are actually from the contracting work that was done down on the Green River. And that was in, we're talking about dump truck load. So that's, that was all weighed as it kind of moved off site.
I was thinking earlier in the presentation, which I think you did mention it, but I was wondering if these operations on these rivers do in fact, I was thinking they had to leave them cleaner than they were even before the flooding happened. Like
Yeah.
a tire that was at the bottom of the river, maybe upstream, is now just further downstream for you to find. So these rivers, I mean, gosh, they must be pristine when you walk away from them eventually.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that. I've been boating and fishing and recreating all over Western North Carolina since I was a kid. And, we Mountain True historically has been, and many other organizations historically have done river cleanups. But in a lot of instances, you kind of move through, you get the big stuff. When our teams hit the ground, they're kind of moving through this with a fine tooth comb. We want to get all that small microplastic out before it washes into the river, and then makes its way further down into the ecosystem and deteriorates. So yeah, that's been something I kind of didn't expect when I jumped into this. But you might happen upon a site that one of our cleanup teams has hit, and it just is absolutely the cleanest that I've ever seen some of these sites. There's some historical trash that's been there for years, that poses challenges where we want to make sure that, like, sometimes it may be holding portions of the bank together. So we approach that with caution and consult who we need to make sure that we're following the best practices and trying to, again, take care of these areas as best we can.
The chat wants to know what's been the greatest challenge so far in coordinating the cleanup effort.
Yeah, I think, the greatest challenge really has been just the making of the plan. Because again, there's sites where you get to, and it's a little bit overwhelming. It's like, how do we even approach this? And that's something that I personally find very enjoyable is kind of being flexible and rolling with the punches on this. So I think that that's typically one of the greatest challenges we face. It's like, where do you even start? And again, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but usually the answer is you just get in and you go for it. And then, a few hours later, you turn around, you take a break for some water, you walk back to the site, and you're like, all right, okay, this is starting to look better. And then by the end of the day or the end of the week or whenever it is that you might wrap up, you look back and you're like, man, this is unbelievable. We've actually restored this to what it looked like before the flood. So there's a lot of challenges, but that one is definitely one of the bigger challenges, but for me, also one of the most enjoyable challenges.
What has been some of the biggest changes you've seen to these waterways, to these rivers in the wake of Helene?
Sure. Some of the biggest changes we've seen are, in some instances, banks are just simply gone. They've eroded away. We've paddled through stretches of river where there's buildings that have fallen down into them. Again, a lot of the heavy lifting has been done by the Corps of Engineers. There's been some instances where we come back after that work and the rivers look completely different. There's islands on some of these places that previously had lots and lots of trees. And now some of these islands, either through the hurricane itself or through some of the debris removal process through heavy hands, that topsoil and trees are gone. So that could be one of the more striking place or differences. Other differences that you might see: some rivers, the way you would take a canoe down it or a raft is exactly the same. Other rivers, that is completely changed, and now the channels are different, and there's islands and places that there didn't used to be, or rock cobble bars or sandbars. So lots of changes. For the most part, we're pretty happy to report that most of the navigable waterways we're still seeing are still navigable.
Do your crews, do you think about restoring navigation on
Yeah,
especially some of these places where, lots of folks are probably gearing up for recreation season?
absolutely. From the get-go, that was one of our bigger priorities, is like, get the stretches that are heavily trafficked by both commercial and private boaters safe again. A good example of that is some of the coiled plastic that I showed in previous images. When we first started, that was actually in the water and imposed an entanglement or an entrapment hazard. So we worked. That was kind of the first thing that we wanted to get out, not only for the upcoming paddling season, but also just the safety of our own crews as they operate. So yeah, that's always on the back of our minds. I think a lot of the folks we employ and volunteers are there because they use these waterways, they use these rivers. So it's pretty common that if you're on a site and there's a hazard, somebody's going to bring it to our attention, and we're going to work to address that if we can on site that day, and then if not, we'll call for support however we need to again make that waterway safe for navigation.
Excellent stuff. Awesome work that you've got going on there. Thank you for coming out today, spending some time with us and sharing it.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. We're really grateful for the North Carolina DQ support as we kind of work forward. We're going to continue, like I said, until we've got everything cleaned up.
Great stuff. Let's see. The Office of Environmental Education, they dropped links to the organization's websites over there in the chat, folks. So if you want to learn more, the resources are there. But Jon, since you're here too, how can people stay plugged in or get more information about what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would just defer everyone to our website. So that is mountaintrue.org. So mountain spelled out true.org. Also, we have a pretty active social media presence. So between Mountain True, you can look at that. You can look at our different Riverkeepers social media pages. But yeah, there's the opportunity to find about all the work that we're doing, not just in our Clean Waters program, also our Healthy Communities and Resilient Forests. And then also, if you're interested, there's the opportunity to donate or sign up for a volunteer opportunity, which again, will be continuing to operate all over Western North Carolina.
Excellent. Amazing stuff. Folks, take advantage of those resources. And I hope that I will see you all again back here for another edition of the Lunchtime Discovery series. This has been fantastic. I guarantee the next one probably also going to be great. If you like this, then you will also love probably next Wednesday. We've actually got Dr. Seth Hawkins, who's a medical doctor, but is also working on a project about wildland fire and cultural burning. So don't miss out. We're going to be talking about wildfires and burning in North Carolina. Dr. Seth Hawkins next Wednesday at noon here on the Lunchtime Discovery Series. You can go to the website eenorthcarolina.org to sign up for the email newsletter for this program. That way you can get the YouTube link in your box every single Wednesday morning. I hope I'll see you back here again soon. Like I said, we meet interesting people, we learn interesting things, and today was no different. So come and see us again real soon. Take care, everybody. Stay safe out there. Be kind to one another. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.